The Pokemon Showdown and Smogon tier changes are finally here, and there have been a lot of changes on Pokemon Showdown. We're going to start with OU and continue through all the tiers so you can understand what changed in every single tier, and make sure you watch till the end because I'm going to be discussing my new favorite strategies in each tier, as well as tackling the elephant in the room, that is the OU to UU tier shifts, because a lot happened while moving from OU to UU. So let's go ahead and start with the UUBL to OU mons, Victini and Blissethylon. Now these don't have any functional change. You couldn't use them in UU before, and you still can't use them now. But it's interesting to see that they have enough usage to finally move to OU. Victini in particular has become more popular with these type of Volt turn cores with Tapu Koko, for example. Electric terrain can help Victini, and Victini's speed is really good for something like Kyurem. It's overall a very interesting pick. It's kind of like a discount Cinderace in some ways, but its bulk is really nice, especially for an offensive fire type. And it has access to Scorching Sands to hit, for example, Heatran. It's overall a really interesting Pokemon. Blissethylon, I'm less optimistic about. I think Blissethylon is more of a function of natural fluctuations going up and going down, because there's nothing in particular that would make you want to use Blissethylon more. It's just a very good Pokemon in OU because of its stats, but there's nothing metagame specific that I would attribute to Blissethylon going up. And if we look at the usage stats right now, if we go to OU right now, we can see Blissethylon around the 5% mark, I believe. Yeah, Blissethylon at 5.7. It's just an overall decent Pokemon, and I wouldn't really attribute any metagame change itself to Blissethylon Rising. Now we look at these two, and Barraskewda, Pelipper, Ninetales, Alola, those can all be attributed to weather. Hail has become the best weather in OU, which is something I never thought I would ever say, but the Arctozolt Ninetales Alola combination has become the best best weather in OU. Now, rain is always going to be fun. I wouldn't say it's become better. It's just one of those things where the usage fluctuates on and off, and rain is always going to be popular because it's a lot of fun to play that offensive style of team. So it's similar to Blissethylon in the sense that its viability has not really shot up. It's just a natural fluctuation. Now, Buzzwole is different. Buzzwole's viability has gone up very recently, and it's because of its ability to check a lot of Pokemon, and in particular, it can check Weavile. Weavile has become a top threat in OU, and having a nice physically defensive Pokemon that can handle Weavile is really valuable. And not just that, but because of its coverage, it can handle things like Landorus, Weavile. It matches up well versus a lot of the things you see at the top of the ladder. So it does match up well versus Landorus, it matches up well versus Heatran because it can outspeed, matches up well versus Ferrothorn, Weavile. It has coverage moves, like it has Ice Punch to hit Garchomp, Thunder Punch to hit Corviknight and Tapu Fini. It's overall a really good Pokemon that can fit on a lot of balanced teams, which is why Buzzwole went up. Then we move down here. We see Diggersby. Diggersby has overall seen a big use in UU, and it's just a really powerful Pokemon. You really like that normal stab. It has a lot of versatility as well. If we go and see Diggersby right now, Diggersby in UU has 5.6. It's a very decent Pokemon, I would say. Now, again, we move down to Seismitoad. Water Absorb with Stealth Rock is really good for like the Thunderuses of the tier. And one thing I really want to check out is Celebi. Now, unfortunately for Celebi, Celebi's viability is directly tied to Zarude, because Zarude is a hard counter, and it's very common in whatever tier it was. So when Zarude is RU, Celebi will be NU. But Zarude recently moved to UU. And guess what? That means no Zarude in RU, which means Celebi can be good in RU. So Zarude and Celebi are completely related, and the reason you're seeing Celebi go up is because Zarude went up last time around. And then we have Lucario, always a good offensive Pokemon, one of the most threatening Pokemon in Pokemon history, moving up to RU. Then in PU and NU, I'm not as experienced in it, but we see Passaman going up, we see a different Silvally form going up, and this LC to PU Ferroseed is a little bit misleading. It doesn't actually mean anything. You can still use Ferroseed in Little Cup. It just means that Ferroseed is also good enough to be used in PU. It's not actually a very meaningful statement to say LC to PU. And now we can finally move on to the big ones, the OU to UU changes, and this is where it really is impactful. So Excadrill has always been an OU top dog. In fact, it was even banned from OU in Black and White. It's always been a top dog. So it's really interesting to see it move down right now. And the main reason is that it's just not really good with Landorus in the tier. Landorus can basically wall it Wall is a strong word, but it can handle Excadrill pretty decently, and it's just usually not worth bringing an Excadrill on your team when you have other steel types like Melmetal, other ground types like Landorus, and sand teams itself are not very good right now. They're not even better than Rain or even Hail right now. So unfortunately, Excadrill did drop, and it's going to be interesting to see how Excadrill plays out in the UU tier. And it might be broken, it might not be broken, only time can tell right now. Then we have Hydragon, which has always bounced around between OU and UU. But the reason it's not that good in OU anymore is that, one, it's not fast enough. You would probably want to use Dragapult. But two, even though it checks Heatran, that's one of its selling points. But it still struggles with fairy types like Tapu Fini, Tapu Lele, to an extent Tapu Koko. But it also struggles with specially defensive Lando. And this is important because say you have Hydragon versus a team with specially defensive Lando and Tapu Fini. What do? Do you predict Fini? Do you predict Lando? Do you double switch? But if you double switch, which one do you predict? Do you predict the Fini or do you predict the Lando T? It's really complicated, and in practice, Hydragon really struggles versus U-turn Lando T with specially defensive EVs. So Hydragon's viability is basically, it can check Heatran, but other than that, it struggles a lot. Then we move on to Mandibuzz. Now Mandibuzz was really popular to check Dragapult, but Dragapult itself is not as common, and you don't need Mandibuzz to check Dragapult anymore. You can use something like Corviknight. The main issue is that Mandibuzz is weak to Toxic, and it doesn't really do much. It switches in, it's really bulky, it takes a hit, but then what? It can U-turn, it can foul play maybe, but overall it really struggles with fairy types, which have become the name of the game right now. Then we move on to something like Skarmory, and Skarmory is just a case of being outclassed by Corviknight. The pros and cons are that Skarmory has spikes, but Corviknight has U-turn. And a lot of teams don't really need spikes, especially in a heavy-duty boots metagame. So Skarmory's viability has naturally gone down. It's not a bad Pokemon in OU, it's just that you would rather use Corviknight. Then we have Slowking, and a few months ago, everyone was talking about Slowking about being really broken because of heavy-duty boots and teleport, but that hype has died down, and now we see Slowking in UU. So that's pretty interesting. Swampert has always been mediocre. It was always barely hanging on in OU, but it's really mediocre. And finally, it made the drop to UU. Then we have a few other things like Doublade dropping, Regidrago dropping, Snorlax dropping. Regidrago has always been kept afloat by the fact that it's cool, it's a legendary, it has like Dragon's energy, but it's really not that good, which is why it dropped down. So we've basically gone over all the drops. Now I want to talk about what I'm looking forward to in UU. So UU, obviously Excadrill, and the first thing I think of is Excadrill Sand. But the problem is that UU doesn't have Hippowdon and it doesn't have Tyranitar. So you're probably going to be looking at some sort of Gigalith Sand, Gigalith plus Excadrill. And the other problem for Excadrill is that Skarmory is a hard counter, in fact. So you might have to pair it with something like Magneton, and a core I've really liked in OU has always been Excadrill and Magnezone. So it'll be interesting to see if Excadrill plus Magneton ends up becoming popular. So that's what I'm really going to be looking out for. I'm going to be looking out for the rise in usage of Gigalith and Magneton. Those are two things I'm going to be looking out in the UU tier. And then on top of that, I'm going to be looking out for these teleport strategies like Slowking Teleport. How will that play a role in the UU metagame? Because Slowking's teleport thing, it was very vaunted in OU, but how will it face in UU? Because if you look at the UU viability rankings, you have Slowking. It can take on things like Salamence, Como, Amoonguss, Rotom Wash, even Keldeo. It can take these on, Future Sight, and Teleport. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Slowking plays a role in the UU metagame. And then Hydragon as well. Nasty Plot Hydragon can be really threatening in a tier without Tapu Fini. So if we look at the viability rankings again, we see Aegislash loses to Hydragon, Crocodile loses to Hydragon, Salamence actually outspeeds Hydragon, but it can't switch in, obviously. Como can lose to Hydragon, Amoonguss can lose to Hydragon. All of these look really weak to Hydragon, so it's going to be interesting to see how these things work in OU. Hydragon, Magneton plus Excadrill, and then Slowking plus fighting type breakers right now. Those are basically my thoughts on the tier shifts. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the tier shifts, and yeah, that's it.